What is up, guys and girls? Today I'm going to be talking about a comment made by Malcolm Gladwell in a Ask Me Anything on Reddit that was posted about a month ago. Malcolm Gladwell's made a lot of very successful, well-known books. His most recent is called David and Goliath, which I have checked out as an audiobook, which I will be reading eventually, or technically listening to. And he makes a comment about his latest book about the privilege, and how different privileges may or may not help you, all depending on a variety of factors. A lot of factors that I personally didn't even take into account. And if you guys have been watching my videos consistently, you know that I have actually talked a lot about this and stressed how, although generally on a macroscopic level, if you hit a better, upper middle class or just richer family, and you're born into that family, whether it's in Budapest or Bangkok or the United States, generally, you'll be more happy. But once you hit something like the top 10%, things start to change, and ultimately maybe even the top 20-30% of income. The rest, it just sort of warps because there's so many other factors, and happiness no longer equates to how rich you are. And so I'm just going to read this quote out just to illustrate, and he simply talks about how it sort of works backwards from this point on. In David and Goliath, I talk a lot about the paradoxes of privilege. If your parents are billionaires, that might actually be an obstacle to your own happiness and self-development. If you go to Oxford or Harvard, that might actually thwart your desire to graduate with a science or math degree, and so on. Those kind of examples suggest that a category of privilege aren't all that useful. Is it better to be black or white, male or female, rich or poor? Well, it depends on where you live and who you are and what you want to do. If you want to be the President of the United States or the CEO of a company, it's probably not a good idea to be female. But it is if you want to be a college professor. It is also dependent on how you interpret your disadvantage, which goes to the discussion of dyslexia in DNG. Some, but not all dyslexics benefit from their disability. I suspect that is true of everyone who stands outside the center of society. And so this illustrates how complex and how many factors can play into you achieving the ultimate success and / your happiness in your lifestyle. One example is how you interpret your disadvantages in life. Some people would interpret dyslexia as a pain. I know I've met some teachers who do so, and they complain about it. And some people just can't see anything outside of how it hurts them. But even moving outside dyslexia, there's so many disadvantages that people, for whatever reason, maybe their upbringing, maybe that's just what they were taught, maybe they never stumbled across certain books that changed their perspectives and mindsets to take those disadvantages and look at them and pretty much turn lemonade into, not lemonade into lemons, lemons into lemonade, or trash into gold. For me personally, I have stumbled across many books and have watched many interviews on YouTube of successful people, not even interviews, but just them talking and telling you how they themselves and people they know who have been successful have one trait that they've had, not all of them, but one trait that a lot of them have had, is this idea of turning whatever crappy situation or whatever disadvantage they have, whatever crappy day they have, into a good day, something that's going to benefit them, so that whatever freaking happens to them, they use it as an advantage. For me personally, I've done this a lot with videos. In fact, when I've had a crappy event or crappy experience, I sort of turned it into a video and somehow learned something from it, and I've tried to grow from it. In addition, I could go on and on about that, but let's talk about the whole idea of your parents being billionaires, or you going to a prestigious school. And there's a variety of other examples where you're in a privileged status. I know for a fact that a lot of the most like ultra super rich and famous people have children that are just sort of, they they're almost destined, and I hate to use that word, but they almost have decided not to really, they just want to live a pretty normal lifestyle. Think of Bill Gates' children. Think of Warren Buffett's children. Think of Jackie Chan's children. Um, think of Michael Jackson's children. Jackie Chan, a lot of you guys don't know, but in China he's uh, even more famous than Michael Jackson. He can't walk anywhere without being mobbed. Everyone recognizes him. Every single billboard, almost every single billboard, may happen to have his like picture on it. And ultimately, like his child was brought up in this super high status, rich environment, and he does his own thing, but he doesn't have that motivation or drive to surpass his father, nor does he really want to. When you're born in that society, when you're so overshadowed by the accomplishments of your father, rather than being like, wow, that's so awesome. Um, you more so end up like something like, wow, I can never do that. I'm not gonna try. And don't get me wrong, with someone like Will Smith and Jaden Smith, he tries himself, and he, to a certain extent, he probably realizes, wow, my dad achieved a lot. I'm really proud of him. But ultimately, it's very tough to defeat that and come out on top. And your accomplishments are already judged based on your parents. And Will Smith's a great example. He talks about that a lot, about turning crap into gold. And he in an interview he recommends this book, The Alchemist, which symbolizes that, and that's how he overcame a lot of his obstacles in life. Um, as for stuff like Oxford and Harvard, it does make sense. Um, when you realize that you are against the top of the top, it sort of discourages you. It discourages you from trying for the best scientific, the hardest majors in college, science and math, or engineering. But again, at the same time, one could argue that the people who go there know what they're up against and know what they want to do. And again, there's moving on to that whole thing about black, white, male, rich, or poor. Um, ultimately, I do agree. I disagree because just like 30 years ago, most colleges consisted of simply white males that were straight, or at least pretended to be straight. And we have come a long way, and so I definitely think that a lot of opportunities have been opened up to different ethnicities in colleges, and I think that this has allowed a lot of people a lot more choices and options and freedom and chances in life. Having said that, though, I wholeheartedly agree with the whole idea that it totally depends on what you want to do, where you want to live, where you were brought up, where you live now, who you are, and what you want to do with your life. If you were born outside of the United States in somewhere like Africa, probably being white or black doesn't really matter. If you're born in South Africa where everyone's white, I don't know, that could change things. And it's very strange. I always want to visit South Africa because apparently, like, most of the people there are white and they're all very good looking. The females are really good looking there. So I don't know. It's peculiar. It was obviously colonized, but it's interesting. Anyhow, again, it's very, if you're living in a place like China where everyone's Asian, does ethnicity or disparities in ethnicity really matter? And technically, don't you want to fit in or be the same ethnicity in those situations rather than outside? Because in China, it's like there are millions of people and they are all Chinese. That's it. Like, and it's very tough being a different ethnicity there, black, white, and on top of that, like, I mean, I know people who have done something like that. I know I've met some white people who have been born and raised in China, and it was very tough for them. And in addition to that, like when they finally moved back to America, Chinese culture is so different that it's like they don't fit into America, even though they look American now. It's so bizarre, and they didn't fit in, and it's very tough. You know, it is very tough, and it's, I would argue, much tougher than an Asian person, you know, moving to America and being born and raised. Although those present challenges as well. And again, you know, it really depends on where you want, like what you want to be. If you want to be a teacher, if you want to be an artist, if you want to be a CEO, a talk show host, a computer scientist, the occupation in itself really affects how, what sort of advantages your ethnicity and your race and gender and then all these things play. But you have to work on them and realize that these disadvantages can be played upon to your advantage, and realize that these inequalities are being broken down, at least in the United States. And ultimately, like, philosophically, you have to argue, you have to think about, like, why does one person want to be a CEO versus one person wants to just teach elementary school children. And it ultimately comes down to something like race and not race, but like genetics. Maybe it's genetics, maybe it's your upbringing, and maybe it's just all these influences outside of yourself. Maybe like something that spurred your interest in it. And ultimately, it's kind of scary to think that all your interests and what you want to pursue comes down to either all these outside influences, like your genetics, something that's predetermined before you were born, to stuff like certain things that impacted you in life. Ultimately, though, it's a variety of factors, from potentially your parents subliminally influencing you to pursue these certain jobs, which I see like in 90% of the hundreds of college students I've met, where they ultimately want their child to make as much money as possible. I can't say that's a bad thing. Ultimately, they want their child to thrive, and thus they push them towards certain jobs or job types subliminally, and they ultimately, you know, strive for these sort of majors. Or, you know, there's all these other factors involved, like genetics. Maybe you're just born wired to like certain things, and it's kind of scary how that is. And maybe there's other things where, like, you're wired to love something, but you're never introduced to that sort of thing, or introduced in the right way until you're, you know, 15 or 20 years old. And you can see how, like, it's really strange, like, when you realize that, hey, ultimately, like, all these things that I like, or the reason why I want to pursue this job, is maybe down to stuff out of my control. And finally, you know, that's pretty much all I wanted to say based on this one statement. And I hope you guys like this video, and I really much connected with a lot of stuff I've been talking about in a lot of my videos. So ultimately, I really feel like it really clicked, and it really sparked my interest. I haven't actually read a lot of Malcolm Gladwell's books, but I actually have a lot of his audiobooks, and therefore I will read them eventually. And I've heard the reason why I have these audiobooks is because, you know, his books have come up a lot on the radar, on a lot of recommended reading lists that you know, hit on point with me. You know, I'm a lot into investing, personal finance, that sort of stuff, business, and therefore these books, you know, hit on point, as well as other stuff, just, you know, philosophy, success, how to get success, self-help, self-improvement, and so forth. And his books have come up on quite a few recommended reading lists. And that's all I really want to say. As always, like, favorite, comment, share this video with someone you think would like it, and as always, subscribe. I'll see you guys in my next video. Thanks for watching.